Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, a Baxter Professional Services production. Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, where we're experts in nursing and experts in business. I'm Tina Baxter, your host. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. Today's guest is Maggie Ortiz. And today's episode, how one nurse's passion for advocacy led her to the legal profession. Remembering everyone who served and honoring all those that we've lost on this Veterans Day. From Baxter Professional Services and the Nurse Shark Academy. Remembering everyone who served and honoring all. Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show. I'm Tina Baxter, your host. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. My mission is for you to own your seat at the table of nurse entrepreneurship, gaining the confidence, skills, and freedom to live your life on your own terms. You will dream big and expand your consciousness as an entrepreneur. Join us and support these wonderful nurse entrepreneurs and leaders. Today's guest is Maggie Ortiz, and she's with Advocates for Nurses out of Austin, Texas. Maggie has been a nurse for 24 years, starting with her associate's degree in nursing. She worked in the ICU and various hospital specialties, excluding, she happens to know, labor and delivery. She's also driven by her passion for nurse advocacy. So she transitioned from a standing emergency room to a role as a board investigator within an agency. And now she is pursuing her law degree to enhance her ability to support and affect meaningful changes for nurses. So I want to welcome you to the show, Maggie. And our first question is, how did you become a nurse?
Well, I'd love to tell that story. So I just want to clarify, I was within an agency. I'm not currently within an agency. So I've been a nurse for 24 years. I had my associate's degree, as stated, for 15 years. I was going to actually join the military. And then when they said, sign your name right here, I had a child. I was like, so I started community college. So I'm a very big proponent of community college. I then moved on after about 15 years. I started in the ICU. I did have the opportunity to do a nurse residency program, which I highly suggest, and I love nurse residency. Moved throughout the hospital, like I said, everywhere but labor and delivery, and that was by choice. Screaming mom and a baby, no, I'm out. But ICU, ER, pre-op, PACU, endo, IR, cath lab, EP, structural heart. I did do some freestanding emergency room, travel agency, local. So that's pretty much my experience. After about 15 years, I did transition to a border nursing. I went to national training. I learned how to investigate. I became very intimate with the rules and regulations that dictate our practice. It doesn't matter what state you're in. I did come back to my state, and then I had to become very intimate with my own rules and regulations, and then use the disciplinary matrix to learn how to apply that to sanction a nurse. I only stayed for a short period of time. I didn't feel like we were being extended due process. I started studying up on administrative law and what that meant. So roughly almost a decade ago, I did cross over like yourself and become a legal nurse. A legal nurse reached out to me to look at a case as an expert. So I became a civil expert. Again, continuing on this journey. And then I started helping nurses and their legal teams when they're under investigation. So now I only do administrative cases, helping nurses and their legal teams when they're under investigation, and then providing the bedside nurse with education. Because like I do as a legal nurse, one of the first things that's going to be subpoenaed will be the medical record. And if it's not documented, it's not done, right, nurse? And then if the documentation is poor, it just doesn't reflect very well. It just sets a bad stage. So that's the long and short. Like you said, I am pursuing my law degree. I actually test next Tuesday because I do feel so driven to make change. And I think as an RN-JD is I don't really have a choice. So that's the route I'm pursuing.
Awesome. So let's back up a little bit. because I wanted this to for our listeners that may are have just started nursing school or considering nursing school. I wanted to go back to your choice of attending a community college. I am a big proponent of community colleges as well. I think if that is an option available to you and you want to use it to transition to a baccalaureate degree, I think that is a perfectly legitimate option. And I'm a big supporter of that. But it's interesting that you chose that route. What made you choose that route?
Well, I mean, in all honesty, I didn't think I was smart enough, quite honestly. My sister was a genius, I was not. And so I didn't take the SAT, I didn't take the ACT because I was going to join the Air Force. So I just didn't feel like I was smart enough. I now know that not to be true. And anyone who's listening, I hope that you realize that is not true. So it was easy access to education. So it was a step in. They oftentimes will do like a basic assessment, because again, I had not done the standardized test, the ACT or the SAT, which a lot of these big universities would have required me to take for entrance. They
Yes.
did a basic I don't you probably know what the test is. They did do some kind of basic evaluation, and I did have to take like in like maybe it was the class, and again, it's been a hot minute ago because I've been practicing for almost 25 years. This would have been 25, 28 years ago, maybe now. Um, but maybe it was the class before the algebra, or it was the class before the English that I had to take maybe an additional little a class. But it was a great opportunity, and don't let that be a deterrent to you at all.
Yeah, in Indiana, I know right now it's called the TEAS test that they have to take to get in. I don't know what it was then. Um, but when I went to school in high school, you had two tracks. You had college ready, or you had some sort of technical track. And so if you were college ready, you had to take certain classes, and one of these you had to do was take your SATs and your ACT. You you were actually not allowed to take certain classes because they were considered technical classes. So in the secretarial school, that's where they teach you how to type. So this is back when you had to type on a typewriter. And I had to petition the school to allow me to take typing because I wanted to learn how to type my own papers because I'm going to college. My mom's not going with me. She types all my papers. My mom, you know, and I said, and they're like, well, you could pay someone. I could, or I could learn how to type myself. So I petitioned to do this. I take the typing class. I get my 80 words per minute that you have to get to pass, etc.
For those of you who don't know, that's impressive. That's
Yes,
impressive, folks. That's very impressive.
yes.
Just
In
so you
order to
know.
pass, you had to get 80 words per minute because again, this is a technical program, so they want you to be a proficient secretary when you leave, right? I do all this, and then the world changes, and everything goes to computers, electronics, and all your documentations on the computer, right? And I have nurses and doctors that work with me, and they're like, "Why don't you just dictate your notes in the Dragon?" And I was like, "I can type faster than I can talk." Because I took typing, and one of the tests you had to take was on a manual typewriter. Not even the Selectric, the ones that you go
Right?
too
Yeah.
fast. Yeah. No, it was a manual typewriter, and you had to type for so long, and you could only make like, I don't know, like 5 or 10 mistakes. And so with those, you're like clunk, 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 clunk.
Yes, and then mistakes. People don't realize nowadays that autocorrect automatically corrects that for you
Yes.
oftentimes, and that you're not going to have to go back to correct that. So that's again pretty impressive.
So I say that to say, you may not start where you you may think that you're not in a good starting in a good place,
Amen.
right? But the important thing is that you started. And I always tell my students, I say, hey, look, if you're going to start in the CNA program, great. Work in the CNA program, learn how to be a CNA, do that well. Come back, see me a year later. Let's get you in the QMA program. We'll teach you about the medications, and I'll teach you how to stay safe. and what to do to document and to know your scope of practice. So if the nurse asks you to do something outside of your scope of practice, you go back to her and say, this is my scope of practice. I cannot give this medication. You have to give this medication because you're the nurse. And then use that as a springboard to go into the medical field wherever you want to go. So I applaud you just getting started. There's so many people that already count themselves out before they get started.
Well, and let me just chime in as well. So I get reached out to all the time because, again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm just a nurse, but I was trained within an agency and ask me, so I had a misdemeanor or, something happened prior in my life, I can't go to nursing school. That is not true. That is absolutely not true. Please, please do not think that that's a deterrent. Yes, will you have to disclose that? You will. But more often than not, the board has a process, unless it's a felony, but even some felonies, but unless it rises to the level of a felony, please, again, do not let that be a deterrent. Let the board decide whether that you do meet the criteria to go to nursing school, because what you did at 18, 19, 20, and now stop. Don't do that to yourself.
And unfortunately, I think a lot of our nursing boards aren't really forward thinking. Like, for example, in Indiana, there was a big lawsuit. They got sued, and of course, they lost. Um, where the state board was telling nurses who were in the diversion program, right, that they were there for their recovery. They were taking medication assisted treatment, and they were telling them they have to come off that medication because they were abstinent only, and they were putting nurses in jeopardy of relapse because of that stance. And it's because they have nurses that are on these boards that may not have worked in that specialty area, may not be up on the new technology, new things, and so they're just so black and white in what they see.
And I'm so proud of that nurse who took it all the way up there. I do know this case. And so, because it does fall under what they consider ADA, because some
Yes.
of these entities are sovereign, and I'm not going to get into all the woods, but some of why I'm here, nurses, I'm trying to do stuff in the backdrop that you may not know about, but it has to be very specific. And so this nurse did take it all the way up. And so, yes, and I do believe it was around, are you talking about the Suboxone? Where
Yes.
now they're allowed to take, yeah, Suboxone. And I know some of those nuances are still, the last time I checked, again, my bandwidth is only so big, because now the board has to adopt rules and regulations, or that a governing agency around that and around monitoring. Because if the stuff that you're referencing, the board doesn't regulate that. It's handed over to an independent agency. My state is called Texas Peer Assistance Program Resource. But each state has their own independent, it's funded independently, but then they're going to have to figure out the monitoring piece of that as far as the nurse. So yes, we need to, let's look at cannabis. I see, nurses reached out to me, are you here? And I'm sure it's all over the nation, where a nurse lives in a state where it's recreationally legal and medicinally legal. And especially like these, no disrespect, but the baby nurses, the newer nurses, they go for their pre-employment and or even with CBD, because there's no way to discriminate either one of these out, even on a hair follicle test. And then they test positive for, THC, and then they are disciplined, they're looked at, and then, but that's the state says one thing, but then there's federal regulation. And so again, I'm going to also go back to, you have to know the rules and regulations that dictate your professional license. But I do believe that boards need to get on board with some of the stuff. The National Council for State Boards of Nursing needs to put out some position statements or some guidelines, because they set the guidelines for each state to adopt their own rules and regulations and how they want to govern their providers, licensee holders.
It's really different depending on the state that you're in. And I noticed there's a difference if you are in a different specialty. So it seems to me, and this is just my personal observation, that physicians kind of almost get a pass by the medical. I mean, it takes a lot to get a physician's license, right? But nurses, we're just like, yeah, we pounce. I don't understand that mentality, but it just seems like we're just so ready to just take somebody out of the field completely. And I don't understand that. Where is the philosophy to see if you can rehabilitate that nurse to where maybe, okay, maybe they did something like in the Redonda Vault case? Very good example. Originally, and those of you who don't know, originally the State Board of Nursing did dismiss her case, pretty much told her you got to do some education, you'll be fine, but later came back because of the criminal charges. My question is, why are we so quick to pass judgment on one another as nurses?
So part of the problem is as well is that we don't even hold professional liability insurance. Do you think that, do you know one physician who doesn't hold professional liability insurance? So some of it even for optics, when a physician stands there in front of a board or they have their attorney respond versus a nurse who doesn't, and let's just say 50-50 for all intents and purposes, 50% do, 50% don't. The 50% that don't, again, for optics, I have seen across the nation, and it's a common sense argument, how they treat a lawyer versus they do a nurse is going to be very different. But even what the attorney will allow the nurse to say or allow the nurse will be different than what the nurse will independently respond on their own. Physician, I'm going to say 99.9% of them, and I do think it's required, and I don't want to speak out of turn because I don't know this 100%, but again, another common sense logical argument, because they're an LIP, they have to have some form of professional liability insurance. I don't believe that, I mean, they can, but it's probably not a wise decision to make.
Right.
But they do. But to your point, why do we eat our own? Why do we throw each other under the bus? I am uncertain. Now, in Redonda's case, I think as an organization, they threw her under a bus. That's the bigger picture. It's
Yes.
not one independent nurse, but she became that scapegoat for that organization. And I do believe there were some political things going on around the water cooler in that state. And because why was it picked up criminally? Why was it picked up criminally? That's just my opinion. There'll be, plenty of people, and I've heard this from my people because we're in the legal nurse world. So there are plenty of legal nurses who do think that it did rise to criminal conduct. I do not believe it to be that. And I do believe that I have more intimate, knowledge than maybe some other people do. I don't always, speak openly about those things, but I do have some intimate knowledge. And again, I saw her speak, I was with her, a couple weekends ago, when she was even staying on a stage. And I don't think that some people realize that, let's just talk about the drug, for instance. We do normalize things in our environment. When she was opening up this drug and reconstituting a drug to people who are experienced, one of the arguments is like, why didn't she know it should be reconstituted? Because she had been a nurse for less than 3 years. This was post, I can't remember which hurricane. We were using drugs in our environment. I can tell you, I called pharmacy personally because I think that there was a label that I think it was Versed that was now, because Versed is normally in an orange vial, and I think it was green. And I was like, I called pharmacy. I was like, what's happening? But I've been a nurse for a long time. We were normalizing stuff in the environment. They were using drugs and from companies we'd not done before because we couldn't get the supplies because they were coming from a new spot. So it's easy to focus the lens all the way in, and pass judgment when you don't even realize maybe some of the other things that were happening. No scanner down in radiology. She asked for it multiple times. I have a lot of experience down in radiology. I've done general radiology. I've done interventional radiology, interventional cardiology. It's a scary place to be. So there are a lot of things that got normalized that, again, it's easy to focus that down. And again, I'm going to reiterate, I don't believe it rose to criminal conduct, but that's just my opinion. And,
Yes.
it may not be the most popular one.
And can I just say, apparently that is the opinion of the judge too.
Well, and I thought it was interesting that the judge did in her sentencing, because the defense wanted her, or sorry, the plaintiff, she was on the defense. The plaintiffs wanted her charged because in Tennessee had moved from a class C to a B, which would have been, and again, don't misquote me, because again, I do believe it was, now it's 15 years to life mandatory. But at the time that the petition was filed against her, it was still a class C. So during sentencing, the judge did bring that to the plaintiff's attorney to say, no, she will be sentenced with that consideration and not the new one just because when it was filed. So I don't feel like, maybe the judge had, again, I'm not speaking for anyone. I mean, the jury comes back, that, you know what I mean? It's just, it is what it is. I mean, it just, some of the stuff is very disheartening as a nurse. And why would we join this profession instead of like coming around her? I mean, some of the nuances that came to fruition, because again, it was a computer system of their own that was being married with another one, and not enough kinks were worked out prior to it becoming live. And that's just the big takeaway as far as I'm concerned. An inexperienced, and I believe I call anyone who's been a nurse less than 5 years inexperienced, right? An
Yes.
expert in welding, plumbing, teaching. Anyone, you're not an expert until you're at least 5 years. She's been a nurse for 2.5, 3 at best, and we're floating around a hospital, we're precepting, we're doing a lot of other things, and a nurse in a new setting should just be honing their own skills and instead of taking on these other responsibilities. But that's an issue that I have with our profession in general. But I know I got real long-winded, Tina. Sorry.
No, that's okay. No, I was just thinking because, that's an interesting take because I'm thinking about, I was just speaking with another nurse previously, and we were talking about pathways and internships and things like that in nursing. And I'm like, we do this for physicians, right? We give them that opportunity to learn in a controlled environment. But yet we had nurses that were graduate nurses, hadn't even taken boards yet, were working on the floor and is given this responsibility during the pandemic. And I think, we're wondering then now, why are these nurses burning out and leaving the profession? Because we haven't given them the support that they need. And then we expect them to function like a nurse that's been at it for 10 years. And I don't get it. I'm like, where is the disconnect? And part of it is, I hate to say this, and I'm not picking on hospital administrators per se, like anyone in particular, but I had an administrator, not of a hospital, but of a facility, who basically had the audacity to say to an RN, well, a nurse is a nurse is a nurse, an LPN is just as good as an RN, and what's the difference?
Wow.
And it took, this is an RN with a master's degree. It took the physician medical director to look at him and say, that is inappropriate and it's insulting, just as if you would tell a physician that an NP is the exact same thing as a physician. And I can tell you, as an NP, we are not. And I'm proud to be a nurse practitioner
Yeah, yeah.
and not a physician. I chose nursing over medicine for a reason. But I digress. But this is the mentality that you have in hospital administration, who may or may not have any medical knowledge whatsoever. All they know are numbers and figures, and they know how to stay the budget so they can get their bonus. And that's what they know.
And unfortunately, and I hate to break it to them, so unfortunately, that can lead to criminal conduct for them because they do not hold a professional license. And I would love to tell you that I've never seen that, but I mean, before we got on, we kind of were talking about some things. And if you don't hold a professional license, that doesn't absolve you of the vulnerable people, the populations, because you do have a degree in something and you will be held to that education, training, and knowledge. And part of your duty when you take that position is that you will understand and know the people who are in your organization, and the providers that hold professional license are held to a standard, and your duty is to make sure that we're staying within that standard so it doesn't absolve them of any
Mhm.
of that stuff. And that's really disheartening that some, and not only that, not it's not just disheartening, it's actually a violation of the rules and regulations, because that's absolutely not true. And one of the things, even under the decision making framework, was something that I reference all the time, that's on the National Council for State Boards of Nursing, and then I was taught to use in the investigative process. And it's a simple, 1 through 6 or 7, and the nurse administrator and the administrator are supposed to know about this, and a nurse cannot accept a duty, a responsibility, if they do not have the education, training, and knowledge. And it specifically says that in there, and I am quoting that, and it is their duty, and I am using the word duty, and like I do, like as a legal nurse, the word duty, whoo,
Yep.
whoo, that is loaded. And once you become a nurse and you have a degree, and then you choose to be licensed in a state, you have no idea what you just did. And you will be held to that standard. I'm not telling you some of it's right, but it just is. So you cannot allow someone, especially someone who doesn't hold a professional license, because that's negligence. And then you have to remind them of that. My duty to the patient in my state of Texas, this is a position statement passed in 1983, 1514, that I have a duty to the patient that supersedes a hospital policy or a physician order. I work for the patient. Nurses need to remember that we are their last defense. You need to be very, very, very empowered with your rules, your regulations. When a nurse comes to me and like they did not, love. I promise
Yep.
you, they didn't. Was there a gun held to you? Because then that's different. Then we'll be talking about something different. But if not, look at that nurse in Florida who called 911 in the emergency room because there wasn't enough staff. What was she else was she supposed to do? You can't hold me to the standard that I'm supposed to protect these people. Well, who else can I call besides 911? She did exactly what she was supposed to do to protect those people.
That's right. You can't accept an unsafe assignment and then turn around and say, well, they made me do it. I know of a nurse, this was years and years ago. She was the only nurse on duty in this nursing home on night shift. And she had over 30 residents. I think she had, I can't remember how many, but she had over 30 residents that she had to pass meds for and do all the care for on night shift. She was the only nurse. And my question was, and why did you stay?
I love you.
Why are you still working there? And it's
Right.
because we think, oh, well, who's going to take care of them if I don't?
Yes. Yeah.
Someone will, or
Yep.
they will close and they will send them to places where they can be properly taken care of. But you have to treat your license as your business. And if
Thank
you don't
you.
take care of business, you will be out of business.
And I'm just going to double down on that, sister. I'm going to double down on that because I know things, I have a body of knowledge that a lot of people don't have. And that's why we're here. We're trying to help spread, some of the message and the education. I only came by this knowledge because of where I landed. So I'm here to tell you. So let's just talk about this setting. There is negligence. Something happens. A patient falls, has a bad outcome. You fail to recognize that. They expire within the building. Can you or can you not say that you didn't have enough staff? No, because again, you will be asked, what did you do? And again, I'm going to double down on that. I have seen nurses. This nurse has been in the media. In that state of Pennsylvania, the patients have a right to fall. Patient fell, had a bad outcome. It became criminal conduct. So again, doubling down on what you're saying and swinging back, you will be put on the Office of Inspector General list. Let me say that again. You get a revocation of your nursing license, as this nurse did, or even like we talked about Redonda. Anyone who gets you get your nursing license revoked. So a revocation means you get it revoked. You will end up on the OIG list or the Office of Inspector General list. That oftentimes then ties you to National Practitioner Database codes. So NPDB codes for a nurse practitioner LIP, that's a big, huge deal. That's tied to reimbursement for CMS, for anyone, for professional liability. And I don't want to bore anyone with these details, but look up any nurse, open up that pamphlet, that newsletter, whatever you get sent every quarter with nurses, the list of nurses who've been disciplined. Go now, then look them up on Nurses. Click on their agreed orders because yes, they are there on Nurses. Some of us call it the wall of shame that never goes away for life. That's NURSYS. That is where those will land. And then look up and see what MPDB code is listed under. Go to the drop down. If that's patient abuse, neglect, Tina, you know, like I do, even if you do get to hold on to your license, where do you think you're going to work?
Maybe corrections.
Probably even not, because they're vulnerable. Actually, corrections is
Mhm.
considered a vulnerable population. So
Yeah.
more often than not, nurses have to work in a place that doesn't take insurance or doesn't have a vulnerable population. If you're on the Office of Inspector Generalist, you can't even walk into a nursing home and volunteer. Let me say that again, because that's
Mhm.
an at-risk population, a daycare, a nursing home, because they have elder law that protects them, right? And a lot of
Yes.
us don't know these nuances. And so, point being, what do we keep saying? Tina already said, your license is your business. So
Yes.
please lock that down. Protect yourself. No one will protect it like you do. And I will say again, professional liability insurance. Please do yourself a favor and call your home insurance company, your car insurance, and say, do you underwrite for professional liability insurance? That's question number one. Question number two, I want you to ask them, do you underwrite for an expert nurse? Now, Tina said that she was a nurse practitioner. More often than not, these organizations, they do underwrite for an LIP, so a licensed
Mhm.
independent practitioner. That's what an NP is. That's what an MD is. An RN is not an LIP. An RN and LPN is not. So you need to ask them, do you underwrite for an RN or an LPN for a non-LIP? If they do not underwrite for that and you are a non-LIP, then you need to move on to a different company and you need to find a company that does underwrite, because if you want me, or if a law firm reaches out to me or to Tina as an expert and you don't have the underwriting for that, you then will have to forfeit the money. You'll have to come up with the money to pay the law firm, to pay for the expert to review your case. And that could be anywhere from $300 to $1,000 an hour, depending on your specialty and your modality. So, and again, I know I got long winded, but it's something that I do believe in, because it will financially exhaust a nurse. It's financially exhausting to a nurse to have to be under investigation by a board, could be involved in multiple types of litigation, and then have to come up with the money for a civil lawyer, for administrative lawyer. It will never cover you for a criminal lawyer. But see, if you're covered under these other two, if it does turn criminal, which is rare, then all your money can be spent there instead of across three types of lawyers, right?
And let's not forget that while this is going on, you may not be able to work.
And there it is. Yep. Repeat that. Yep. 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 I've seen
So,
that. I've seen that. And then they're sleeping in their cars. They're calling me. I can hear their kids, right? And it's devastating. It just breaks my heart. Again, why I created Advocates for Nurses. Because you know what? I don't want for you that. So please get yourself professional liability insurance. Document, document, document. Stop normalizing taking unsafe assignments. You know, all the things that we keep talking about. Please heed our advice.
mhm. I have to say, when I was an RN, I always had my own insurance. And in fact, I even had a policy as a nursing assistant
Oh,
Be-
yeah.
because
There you go.
I did not trust the facilities that I worked for
Yep.
at all.
Good
I
for
knew
you.
I was going to be the one thrown under the bus. And so I always, and you can get a policy for less than $100 as a nurse.
It is. It's like a
Yeah.
Starbucks, give up two maybe Starbucks a month. And again, now for
Yeah.
you, it's going to be more
Oh,
expensive.
yeah.
Like the
For an MP,
LIP,
that's a whole other
yes,
story.
yes. But for the RN, stop it. For the LPN, and even like I do expert work. I do. So all you do is you call them and you just tell them, I'm not just in, at the bedside. I'm doing this. Now, if you work in labor and delivery, a place where that type of litigation is like for 20 years, your insurance may be just a little bit more depending on, your specialty. But just like you're
Yes.
saying, it's beyond reasonable. And I do believe you can write that off for your
Yes.
for taxes. And
Hmm.
Tina knows all about the business stuff. So
Yes. That is something you can write off. And I look at it this way. If you get insurance for your car, why on earth would you not have insurance for your livelihood and your profession? That just makes sense to me. And also get an umbrella policy. But anyway, we'll go on from there. And again, I am not an attorney, nor am
No.
I a financial advisor, but I know attorneys and I know financial advisors, and I guarantee you, as a nurse, you want to get to know one of each,
Oh my
and,
gosh,
and,
yes.
a, and a great CPA. Trust me on this. It will save you so much hassle. I have a brand new nurse now who's struggling to get a job. She wants to stay in labor and delivery. Has worked there as a tech for 5 years. They won't hire her in her department because, well, you don't have enough experience as a nurse. Okay. But she's bound to this hospital because the system, because she got money for them to go to school. But now she can't get hired anywhere in that system. And I said, there's two things I would say to this. First off, look for a job elsewhere outside of that system. And second of all, get an attorney, because they're going to hold you to something and they're not even giving you an interview.
That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. And the other
Mm-hmm.
thing is that they're not even willing to. So let's just back it up. So to me, again, I've never done labor and delivery, but when I started in the ICU, I didn't start right into the unit. I started step down, right?
Mm-hmm.
I started the back hall. It was step down. So why couldn't they start her in like postpartum, you know
Yep.
what I mean, and then transition her over? I don't think that that's unreasonable for her to see, to recover some of the moms, manage that, because then
Yep.
now
Put
you
her mother
understand
baby. Mm-hmm.
yes. And again, I don't even know some of these words, but why, again, why would they do that if a nurse already tell you she spent 5 years in a unit? Not only that, do you know what kind of gift she is to that unit? She knows
Wait,
nuances that the other
they,
nurses don't
they even
know.
put her in a commercial for the hospital system.
Oh, stop it. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't understand why we do this. I just don't understand. Because
Mm-hmm.
then again, what she's going to leave. She's going to leave and she would have just stayed there. Why? And again,
Yes.
why? You have too many labor and delivery nurses. Okay, so then just tell me that. You know what? We don't have an opening right now, but let's get you in,
Mm-hmm.
mother baby, whatever it is, the nursery. But and then we'll transition you. We'll do some things, but just outside, tell her no, no, I don't blame you.
Yeah. I was just floored by this whole thing. But and then we're crying about there's a nursing shortage. I just don't get it. I'm like, I would have look, if I had somebody that I knew had been working for us for 5 years, was planning on staying here, wanted to retire from this place, has done
That's
multiple things along the
rare.
way. I would
Rare.
have
That's
found a place for
rare.
her. I would have been like, look, we can't get you an L&D right now, but I'm going to put you over here. We're going to work towards that. I'm going to put
What's
you
your
on
second
P.
choice?
I'm going to do whatever.
What
Yeah.
is your second choice? What can I, and you will be on the first to come over here. What is your second choice? I am so sorry, but
Mhm.
I value you and I want you to stay. That to me is a sign of poor leadership.
Mhm. Yes. And I know this person personally, and I actually taught this person. So I'm
No.
like, you're not going to tell me this person doesn't know her stuff because I taught her twice. And
What, no,
I
you
was like, you
can't
don't
know
get
her
out of my program
stuff.
without knowing something.
Well, and then she brings stuff to the table, but if you don't let her transition to that into practice, you know what I
Yes.
mean? No one's an expert. You have to take what you learn and then you need to be able to apply it. So for them even to make a judgment, I mean, I, like you, am a huge proponent. I was a student nurse tech for a year. And then I
Mhm.
saw it transition when we were starting to do clinicals in nursing school. The nurses that had never were not CNAs, they're like, Mr. Bob, I'm gonna come in. I'm like, hey, Mr. Bob, let's get up, buddy. We're gonna, because I knew where the supply room was. I knew what the routine was. I already was ahead of the game. Right, I was planning the day. I knew what was happening. I knew even some of the nurses. I knew some of their dispositions. Right, I think it should be required. Now, not getting paid for to do that, I think that that's one of the newer things that people are talking about. I don't think that is fair, but
Right.
I do believe that all I think it should be requirement, just like I think all RNs. If you want to become an NP, then no, then you need to be an RN for 5 years, and you at least need to do some inpatient hospital stuff because I have seen where we've gone all the way and they don't know sick or not sick. And I've seen that in a clinic setting. And had I not gone to the doctor, it more likely than not would have cost the patient their life. So I have, thoughts on that as well. I mean, you are not an expert in
Yeah.
anything. And for you to be building on education when you're not even an expert as an RN, how are you building? You're building on what? You don't even have a foundation yet. So learn sick or not sick and then build on your degree.
Yes, I started out as a CNA, was a nurse tech on
Amen.
the floor. Um, Ended up becoming the staff nurse in psychiatry. Interesting enough. And the first day off of orientation, the next shift, I was charge nurse in psychiatry.
Whoa.
Because I got drafted to work the next shift, and they're like, "You're officially off orientation. Go up there and on the third floor on addictions, be the charge nurse. And oh, by the way, you're getting two admissions who need vital signs every 2 hours. You don't have a unit secretary, but you have an aide who can't walk because her knees are bad."
Oh my gosh.
That was my night off of
Wow.
orientation as a brand new nurse.
Wow. See, I hear this every single day. And oftentimes it's the older nurses who come to it as a second career who will puff up a little bit, who will say, nah, I'm not doing that. But I'm like you, when I came out of this, as a baby, you have nurses who can give fentanyl and Versed who can't even order a drink at the bar, who can't go to happy hour. And again, I'm not, endorsing drinking by any stretch of the
Mhm.
imagination, but I mean, it's concerning what the normalization of some of these behaviors in our environment, and we do. That's why I applaud you and thank you for all the stuff that you do, because if nothing else, we both help equip nurses with some of the language so that they can say, they can look at the stuff that we did and say, no, wait, 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 I heard Tina and Maggie say that I don't have to do that, I cannot do that. Texas
Yes.
217, 1S and T, that's the charge nurse making me assignment, that's S. T is me accepting that assignment, that's administrative law. The definition of medical malpractice is knowingly and willingly taking on an unsafe assignment. So as we educate these nurses and help them use these words to help leverage, to empower themselves, and just say, I'm so sorry, nursing leader, just I don't believe that's what it says on the rules and regulations. And it's not about you as the independent nurse. It's you're just saying that we're all held to this and that you're just reiterating what the board says, what medical malpractice is. So yeah, it makes me sad for our profession. And
Hmm.
just to double down as well, when the average experience of a hospital nurse is 2.5 years, let me just say that again. The average experience of a nurse in a hospital setting is 2.8 years. That's worrisome, because now the newer nurses don't have any good behaviors to mirror. And just like touching on what you said as well, they may have come out during the pandemic where doctors were told they didn't even have to go into rooms. They were copy and pasting our assessments, told not to waste drugs. I'm seeing nurses being reported to boards or agencies because they're not wasting drugs. Well, you told me I didn't have to. But that was during the pandemic, and they never had live clinicals, so they don't even get to see normal behaviors because they're seeing the other nurses who are inexperienced do behaviors that are not standard of care, because it's just like this huge big animal that we've lost control of. It makes me sad.
It was really telling some of the issues that were happening in healthcare during the pandemic, and it was a scary time. Where as a clinician, I was like, can I get labs ordered during this time? Are they going to be able to go in and get their labs? Um, they just basically told us. I remember when it first happened, they're like, okay, we're going to go home. We'll be about a week, maybe two. That's what we were told. So for the first week, we shut down. We didn't see any patients. The second week, we were like, well, we better open up and see patients. So the second week
Yeah.
we were seeing patients, and then they were like, well, no, we're just going to stay home sort of indefinitely. I was at home for 2 years seeing patients, talking to them on the phone, because at that time we didn't have the the right infrastructure to do the video visits, not like we do now. And in fact, in Indiana, there weren't even rules to allow us to do video visits, so they had to be created for the pandemic. Fortunately, they keep re-upping the rules. They haven't made them permanent as far as I know, but they keep re-upping it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what is it gonna take for you to just make it permanent, okay? And leave us
Well,
with the
so that's
telemedicine
where,
option.
yeah, and that's where I feel like things like the, legislators coming together and meet under oftentimes what's like sunset, that can't be every decade, right? Because again, I
Yes.
mean, look at like AI and tech. I mean, we're not in a place where we're stagnant in science and tech. There's just a huge integration of that, and the regulation doesn't match that. And, am
Mhm.
I all about, we got to regulate, 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 but we have to do some instance because it will protect the provider. Because again, just like you said, if there's nothing in place for you, Tina, the nurse practitioner, to do your
Mhm.
televisits, someone reports you, then what's there in place to protect you? But if there's some clear language that says, no, Tina's allowed to do telehealth, and here it is, 215, whatever it is in your state, then that does protect you. So we do need to really put pressure on some of our, lobbying agent, organizations like the ANA, each individual state, nurse practitioner
Mhm.
associations who lobby. They have huge lobbying power to get them to put some stuff in place. But that's where, Advocate Maggie as well, you as a nurse need to be making sure you're reaching out to your own representative and helping to champion, stuff in your own state.
Definitely. I think that we, as nurses, we have to stop allowing other people to run the ship when it comes to our profession. We need to be the captain of the ship of our profession. Stop letting other people dictate what nursing is. And as a profession, we need to say, this is what a nurse is, this is what a nurse isn't. For the last 2+ decades that I've been working as a nurse, we are still fighting in Indiana litigation from licensed veterinarian technicians because they want to be called nurses. And the
So
definition of nursing is taking care of people, not animals.
animals. So interesting. So they petitioned the Board of Nursing to try to get a license.
They're licensed veterinary technicians, but they want to be
Yeah,
called nurses. And I'm
nurses.
like, no.
Well, and let's unpack that for your audience. So, nurse is a protected word in 33 or 32 states.
Hmm.
Boards have specific language around the word nurse, which normally requires the use of that to you to hold a license and meet the criteria of a nurse in a state in the United States. So that is a protected word. Interesting you say that.
Hmm.
So anesthesia assistants that have the educational equivalent, and again, I don't want to misspeak, to a CRNA. So they can give the drugs, but it's under they're under the medical board. They don't go to nursing school. They have undergraduate degree in something, and then they get their advanced and anesthesia assistant to
Hmm.
work under an anesthesiologist to sedate patients. So they petitioned the board in Texas for, and this is an AA that was telling me that to get a license under the board of nursing. The board of nursing, I believe, per this AA was like, stop, no, 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 no. These are nurses. These are, so you have to stay under the medical board.
Hmm.
But so where do veterinarian assistants, because there's vet tech,
Yeah, they're
vet.
under
So
the veterinarian board. They're not on
okay,
the nursing board.
okay.
So, but they want to be called nurses. And I'm like, stop it. Why can't
Well,
you just be called a
interesting.
veterinarian tech? Because that makes sense. It tells people actually what you are and what you do. Be happy to be a vet tech, right?
Right. Interesting because I was looking because my youngest was looking at doing some veterinary medicine. And there's three different classifications, right? There's like the veterinarian, the doctor, then there's
Mm-hmm.
two other, there's like like you said, the nurse, and then there's something that's so how I would see it is like the MD, the RN, and maybe the MA is
Mm-hmm.
how they kind of have it in their world. But
Yes.
that's interesting that they were petitioning the The Board of
They
Nursing.
want to be called veterinary nurses, and I'm
Yeah.
like, there's no such thing. And so we fight this like every few years. They introduce the bill, and
Interesting.
ISNA goes up against it. We talk to them and say, this is what a nurse is. This is not what what they do. According to the definition from the ANA, this is what a registered nurse would be. They
Yeah.
do not meet the criteria to be a registered nurse. I'm sorry, because
Interesting.
here's my thing. Would they suddenly decide that, well, I can, work on Fluffy, I could go here and work on
So
you,
there it is. So there
you
is
know?
that is the counter argument. Again, uh, I don't mind the use of the word as long as there are serious restrictions applied to that in
Hmm.
that world, because that is the concern, is that they will take that word and say, oh, I worked on a tiger in, the wherever in the safari, whatever. And now, of course, I can work on humans. So that is, and the duty of the licensing agency is to protect the public. It is never to protect the nurse. And I don't know that enough of us understand that nor know that. I think they graze over that in nursing school. But let me
Hmm.
just repeat that. The actually mission of the regulatory body is to protect the public and not
Yes.
the provider, nurse, doctor, PT, OT, whomever it is. It's the public. That's their duty.
Well, and let's think about this. I took comparative anatomy, so biology major
Say
here.
that again. I don't even know what that is. What?
That is anatomy. It's looking at several different species and looking at their anatomy and differences. And so, having had taken that, I appreciate veterinarians because you have to deal with all kinds of stuff, and we got the human body, and it's for the most part basically the same. I get that, but that in no way makes you the expert on the human body, right?
No.
Nor would I say I'm an expert on the cat, the rhino, the lizard, or whatever else, because I just took one comparative anatomy course. To me, it makes sense. But again, everybody wants the the idea of being a nurse, kind of like that power of being a nurse, but they don't want to actually do the work to become the nurse. They want
Oftentimes
to
that is
actually deal with the
true.
nursing stuff. They just want to take the glamour of it, the glitz of it.
Right. Yes, and
Um,
even some of the stuff around the water cooler with these nurses, I get sent stuff about, you know, buying their degrees or trying to get through nursing school quick. I'm like, that's not a thing. And you should take it
mhm.
very serious. That's not a thing, and you will be found out. Please believe me when I tell you, because some of these cases the FBI is involved. So, and I'll just leave it at that. So please believe me when I tell you
The
that if you
Nightingale
don't
case in
well, even
Florida.
on top of that, even after that, I just got tagged in some stuff on TikTok.
Mhm.
So this was what, like a year ago, nurses to date, like on social
Yes,
media talking about buying a degree, and I'm like, has anyone not learned from the nurse? I mean, what is happening? The FBI is involved. If you do not think that you will be found out, you are gravely mistaken.
I would be
Please.
terrified to go to a
Oh
nursing
my
program in
gosh.
Florida. There are nurses that went through these schools and they may have legitimately gotten a degree from those schools before all this other stuff happened.
I know.
Now they can't even go get into another nursing school to redo their training because they're not accepting them. They won't let
I
them come
know.
in. That
I
is
s
so sad.
and so this is some of the stuff that are there nurses that did, like, write a check? Yes, I'm not gonna s they're always bad apples, but just like you said, I do have some intimate knowledge of some of these nurses that, when if I showed up to a campus and I flew there and you showed me, I don't care if it was in a strip mall, so that means nothing to me.
Mhm.
It was accredited, I flew out there, I saw it. Yeah, I wrote you a check every single month, and I did my ATIs and my HESIs, and I did all that. I had no reason to believe that this was not legitimate, right? And
Mhm.
and again, why is it now that I am truly trying to, and I held an LPN before, and now that is being investigated because you supposedly bought a degree, and now your current licenses will be gone after. And now it's just it's an animal. Please, nurses, tell me if you don't think that you're not going to get caught up into the stuff. But again, like you said, I do have a bleeding heart for these other nurses, get yourself legal representation. You cannot wrangle this yourself. If it's
No.
criminal, then you have to get a criminal lawyer. If it's board of nursing, then you have to get a board of nursing attorney. And unfortunately, it's not like nursing. You don't have a compact license. As my understanding is, as an attorney, you have to be licensed in every single state. There are plenty of attorneys that are licensed in multiple states, but if you hold a license in many states, then and now many states are involved, then you will have to get legal representation in every single state. And let's double
Mhm.
down on what we were talking about earlier, the professional liability insurance. And that's where that right there would be coming into play for you as one of these nurses. So I do have a bleeding heart. And I've read, the deposition of, the nurse that's in prison for, running some of the schemes. I mean, it's all public record. And I
Mhm.
encourage nurses to, do some of this basic research, because you and I know once you cross over to do some legal stuff, your practice will change, your charting will change,
Yes.
things become way different. You walk into that hospital, that environment, and things are lit up that you had no idea about. You're like, wow, this got way, way different. And you may even move away from that job that you're at because you see things that you didn't see before, and you're like, nah, I'm out. I can't be here, because I don't want to be a one percenter, or the one chance, that the one out of what 999, like we always say, for like
Mhm.
birth control or whatever. I don't want to be that percent, you know what I mean? And now I have to stand in front of a board and put up my right hand, and I will be standing there alone, and I will be asked about what I did or did not do.
It's so important, and I want to thank you for all the advocacy that you are doing. And I know you said you're planning on going into uh, uh, become a lawyer. So my question is, as we begin to wrap up here, because we are going, and we can talk for a long time. Um, so my last question is, if you had a piece of advice for a budding entrepreneur, nurses thinking about stepping out there, whether as a legal nurse consultant or even just to doing advocacy work as you do, what would that advice be?
Sure. So I'm going to go back to the professional liability insurance, and you just let them know what you're doing. But then also, you have to get in contact with people like yourself. You have to make sure you reach out to a lawyer. So let's just say you want to be a holistic nurse. I think that's great. You want to be a functional medicine nurse. There's a difference between being an RN and an NP. Because
Yes.
if I go to one of these functional medicine, education programs, and you go to the same program, what you're able to do and what I'm able to do is very different. Yet they give out the same basic information, and that all the templates, you spend $5,000, $10,000 on this program. They give you all these forms and templates. You then have to tailor that to your scope of practice. You cannot let your website go up. You cannot let forms go out. You cannot interact with patients if it's not within your scope of practice. So then you need to go back to a lawyer, you need to go back to your Nurse Practice Act, and you need to make sure that your now new practice as an entrepreneur mirrors your scope. Then you need to make sure that you have policies, that you have procedures, that anything that you're doing, because anytime you cross over and you hold a professional license, there are so many agencies involved, from the hospital
Mhm.
association to CMS to the Joint Commission and yada, 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 that you have to just be real sure that you have things in place. As a nurse practitioner, you open up an independent practice, you have to have policies in place. You have to have HIPAA, you have to have, whatever it is, vaccinations, what, I don't even know all the words, that you have to have that stuff in place. So please, 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 just always think about worst case scenario. If my new business is under a light, and now I'm involved in any type of litigation, does my entity have the things in place? Do I have an LLC? Do I have my own bank account? Have I separated my income apart? Whatever it is, reaching out to the expert like yourself who can set you up with those, because you're not expected to know everything. You are not. But then you reach out to people like yourself and or me to help guide you along that journey, to make sure, hey, I want you to get a hold of this lawyer, or here's a list of lawyers that you can get a hold of from given what you told me. You do psychiatric nurse practitioner. You are in a very high litigious, these are vulnerable people. So I suggest that you reach out to the American Association of Nurse Attorneys and make sure that everything aligns with what your practice is. So I know that was a very long answer, but know the rules and regulations that dictate your practice. Stay in your lane, nurses.
Definitely, definitely. And you might want to consider whether or not you want to say nurse something unless you are legally required
Oh,
to.
there you go. There you
So, as a
go.
wellness consultant,
There you go.
if you say wellness nurse consultant, now all of a sudden, if you don't have a compact license and you talk to somebody out of another state, you're now liable because you're actually crossing state lines. And so you could be sued for that and be outside of your scope. So you have to know what you're doing and where you're doing it if you put that title nurse in there. So it's so funny. You don't have those problems if you're just some Joe Schmo that decided to go to a functional medicine seminar and hang your shingle out, right? But because
Yep.
you have that nurse, you're under a different standard.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, so you have a gift for our listeners. Right now, they can get a $5 subscription on your website. Tell me about that.
Sure, sure, sure. So it's advocates for nurses, FOR, or for. So like a lot of things that you and I were going back and forth about the legal stuff. I get asked about cases like they see in the media, and they're like, "Well, tell me, walk me through that from beginning to end." I did for June. I did failure to respond around AED CPR awareness. A nurse and a CNA, because it's also CNA awareness month last month. Yay, yay, yay! Love me some CNAs, and both of them failing to respond, and what that means under civil, criminal, administrative. I'm not a lawyer, but just breaking that down. So every month I break down a case around something, themes that are happening, just in the United States. And I just lay it out for us to see. If this happens, the one for July is unfortunately around, you're a psychiatric nurse, so it's around mental health. Oftentimes, nurses turn to substance use or will suffer from substance use disorder due to mental health issues, and they'll divert drugs. So it's around, one of the nurses that was charged with 44 counts criminally,
Mm.
and what that means. So that's the case review that I'm doing for July. So I go over some basic things, just do, some fun things. And then what do nurses really want? They really want that case review. So I'm offering for the next, for your subscribers, a $5 discount on my website. So you get that case review in written form. I do video form as well, because everyone wants video pieces of it. And then it's also in written form as well.
Okay, so that you go to your website, and your website again, I just want to make sure to get it.
Is advocates, FOR. So it's advocates with an S, for either FOR or for nurses.com. And all my handles are all the same on all the social media platforms. I don't get crazy. It's all advocates for nurses, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the listeners, and that's why I love nurses. I do this because it's for education. I don't want a nurse to come back to me and they have orders. I would rather a nurse come back to me and say, my life has changed. I moved. I'm happier because of some of your educational resources.
Well, I want to thank you for letting our giving it to our listeners, and so those either listening, all this information will also be listed in the show notes so that you can take a look at that there. I want to again thank you for your time. This will end our show today. So thank you to Advocate Maggie for all the great work that you're doing. If you're watching us on YouTube, please don't forget to hit the notification bell and subscribe. And then also, if you're listening to us through Podbean or any other place where you're getting your podcast for the audio version, we're asking that you leave us a like and a comment. And so we thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Nurses, are you burnt out, frustrated, looking for something new? Are you looking for more? Nurses, are you ready to feel the sun? You will dream big and expand your consciousness as an entrepreneur. Your nursing license is your key to freedom. Join the Nurse Shark Academy at the nursesharkacademy.biz today.
Thank you for listening to the Nurse Shark Academy show wherever you get your podcasts or watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you'll know when all of our episodes come out. If you want further information, you can contact us on the nursesharkacademy.biz.